The mountains have a way of lulling you into a false sense of calm before showing you just how small you really are. That evening, when my friends and I pitched our tents high above the tree line, the air was so still, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. We had hiked all afternoon, packs heavy with gear, and our laughter echoing off the granite slopes. And when we finally reached a small meadow, ringed with tall pines, we agreed it was the perfect spot. The view opened to endless ridges rolling blue into the horizon, the kind of scene that made you forget about aches and blisters. We set about our usual rhythm, gathering wood, unpacking food, raising the tents, and soon a small fire crackled at the centre of camp. The first rumble came while we were cooking. At first, I thought it was just my stomach grumbling at the smell of sizzling sausage. But then the sound rolled again, deep and distant, carrying across the valley. We looked at one another, a little uneasy, but shrugged it off. After all, storms passed quickly in the mountains. The horizon still looked clear in the fading light. By the time the fire burned low and we were stretched out in the grass swapping stories, the air had grown heavy and still. Not a whisper of wind stirred the pine needles above us. That silence, the waiting kind, was what made the hair on the back of my neck rise. It didn't take long. A jagged streak of lightning cracked open the sky, so bright it turned the meadow white for a heartbeat. The thunder followed almost instantly, shaking the ground under us. We scrambled to gather loose gear, shoving sleeping bags and jackets into tents as the wind came rushing down the mountainside. The pines groaned, bending and creaking, and the fire sputtered out under a sudden gust. Then came the rain, hard, sharp drops that stung as they hit, turning into a sheet in seconds. We barely made it inside before the downpour swallowed the camp. I sat inside my tent, listening to the storm beat down, feeling every boom in my chest. The thin nylon walls shivered with each gust, and water ran in rivulets across the ground. Somewhere outside, one of my friends shouted something about a tent stake pulling loose. I grabbed my headlamp and jacket, heart pounding. The storm had arrived in. I rushed over, gripping the line with him, the mud sucking at my shoes as we leaned our weight against the storm. The ground was already a river, streams of water racing downhill, carrying pine needles and grit. Another tent was sagging under the sheer weight of water pooling on its roof. Sarah and Jenna were inside, shouting, their voices thin under the roar of thunder. Together, we grabbed sticks and used them to push the fabric up from underneath, forcing the water to spill down the sides. For a few minutes, it felt like we were running from problem to problem, patching holes in a ship while it sank around us. Then came the closest strike yet. The flash seared the sky, and the boom followed instantly. A crack so sharp it rattled my bones. We all froze for half a breath, hearts pounding, knowing how close it had been. "Stay low!" I shouted, though I wasn't sure anyone could hear me over the storm. Instinct took over. We huddled near the trees at the meadow's edge, not under the tallest ones, but close enough to break the wind's full force. My hands were numb from the cold, my jacket useless against the torrents, and still we worked, tightening knots, piling rocks over stakes, and dragging gear inside to keep it from washing away. For the first time that night, I noticed how we moved without argument. No one barked orders, no one complained. Each of us just seemed to know what needed doing. When Mark nearly lost grip of the guy line, Jenna was already there, grabbing it alongside him. When Sarah stumbled in the mud, I caught her by the arm and hauled her back upright without a word. The storm demanded everything of us, and for once, we gave it without hesitation. The meadow was no longer our campsite. It was a battlefield, and we were holding the line together. At the height of it, the storm became a living thing. The wind didn't just blow, it screamed, whipping through the pines until branches snapped and crashed somewhere in the darkness beyond our light. Every few seconds, the sky tore open with lightning so bright it left ghost shapes in my vision. In those frozen flashes, I could see the meadow transformed. Tents, sharp cracked, that made her cry out. Without hesitation, we dragged her and Jenna's gear into ours, piling sleeping bags and clothes into an already cramped space. The tent sagged low under the added weight, but somehow it held. Lightning cracked again, so close that the air stank of ozone, and for a moment, all of us sat in stunned silence, waiting for the world to split apart. And then, in the middle of that chaos, I felt something shift, not in the storm, but in us. Fear had been riding us since the first rumble of thunder, but now it was replaced with something sharper, steadier. Every shout of warning, every muddy hand clasped around a rope, every glance in the dark, it wasn't panic anymore. It was determination. We weren't going to let the storm take everything from us. We worked in bursts, stealing moments between lightning strikes. I remember crawling on my stomach through the mud to reset a stake that had popped loose, my cheek pressed against the cold earth as thunder rolled above me. When I looked up, I saw Jenna across the way, hauling a pack inside with a grim smile, rain streaking her face like war paint. Somehow, despite the misery, we were grinning at each other, like we both knew we'd never forget this night. The storm had reached its peak, and it felt like it could last forever, but we held on, shoulder to shoulder, clinging not just to our gear, but to each other. Sometime after midnight, the fury began to ease, though at first it was hard to believe. The thunder still rumbled, but it no longer cracked directly overhead. It rolled further off, like a giant retreating into the distance. The lightning came less often too, flickers at the edges of the valley instead of blinding blasts in our meadow. The rain, though, lingered. It poured in steady sheets, pounding on the nylon so loud it drowned out our voices. Still, we could feel it. The worst had passed. By then, exhaustion had caught us all. Our muscles were jelly from wrestling with stakes and ropes, our hands raw from the cold and the mud. We huddled inside the two surviving tents, gear piled high around us, our wet clothes clinging to our skin. Steam rose faintly from our bodies in the close air, and we passed around a single, half-empty thermos crack, followed by a crash that seemed to shake the ground. After that, I don't remember much. At some point, exhaustion won and pulled me under. When morning finally came, it wasn't with the golden sunrise we'd hoped for. Instead, the sky was low and grey, the meadow dripping with water from every blade of grass and pine needle. Our gear was a mess. Poles bent, ropes frayed, tarps gone. Sarah's tent lay in a crumpled heap, half buried in mud. But the storm had passed, and that was enough. We crawled out one by one, stiff and sore, blinking in the pale light. And for a long moment, we just stood there, breathing it in, the silence after the chaos. The mountain had thrown everything it had at us, and somehow we were still standing. By the time the clouds finally broke and a thin shaft of sunlight slid down into the meadow, it felt like we were seeing the world for the first time again. The air was sharp with the smell of wet pine and damp earth, a kind of freshness that only comes after a storm has wrung the sky dry. Every surface glistened, rocks slick with rain, needles beaded with drops that sparkled like tiny mirrors. Our campsite, though, looked like the aftermath of a battle. One tent ruined, tarps shredded, gear scattered and soaked. Yet somehow, looking at the wreckage, none of us felt defeated. We laughed, quietly at first, then louder, until the whole meadow echoed with it. It wasn't joy exactly. It was the kind of laughter that comes when you've stared down something bigger than yourself and walked out the other side. Mark, dripping mud to his knees, raised the mangled pole of Sarah's tent like a flag and saluted. "Survivors," he declared, and for a moment we all cheered. Jenna snapped a branch in half and tossed it on the soggy fire ring. "Next time," she said with a grin, "I vote we camp at the lake. Fewer lightning strikes." Sarah rolled her eyes, but even she was smiling. The fear of the night had drained away, leaving only a kind of fierce camaraderie. We spent the morning drying what we could memories, retold around campfires for years. The storm had stripped us bare, left us cold, wet and afraid. But it had also shown us the strength we only found when we leaned on each other. That, I think, is the lesson the mountains gave us. Storms will come, fierce and sudden. But if you face them together, you'll find you're stronger than you ever imagined.